let's start. Okay, Denise, so thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope this presentation helps you guys as part of the role that you have in the local network. The idea with this, oh, hold on, Darren is here. Let me make him a panelist. The idea with this presentation today is to give you a broad overview of the reporting requirements in the Global Compact. The rules of the game are for this time, you guys are able to speak. I'm working on making Darren able to speak, and you can ask questions. I would ask you if you are going to have noise on your end, on your desk, if you can please mute yourself so we can avoid some noise and background noise. If there's too much background noise, I will proceed also and mute people from my end. But initially, you all have the capability of talking. And please hold your questions for the moments where I'm going to ask you for questions. Don't interrupt, but I will break the presentation in sections for you guys to ask questions.
Okay.
Perfect. So let's get going. We're going to talk today. Yeah, hello, Darren.
Yes, this is Darren, and we're all here.
Okay, great.
Hi, Dan. We've actually been hearing you guys the whole time, and we've been writing on this thing, and you guys haven't noticed, and nobody called us. Whoever, I think Dana Sunham said she was going to call someone, and anyways, we're all here, and so
okay.
we've been listening to you guys have this conversation, like, you know, we didn't dial in or something, and we're all here. So.
Like, where are they? Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, and I didn't see in the system that you were on, so no, I'm very glad to hear you are all on. So since you heard everything, I don't have to repeat myself. Maybe the one thing I forgot to say is my name is Ana Blanco. I'm a reporting manager at the Global Compact office in New York. I handle all things related to reporting. And with me is my colleague Alexandra Tarazzi. She's relationship manager for the MENA region, and so she is in charge. She will be happy to help you guys with follow-up questions. I hope that I solve all the questions. We have 1 hour allocated to the webinar, but by any means, please feel free to contact us afterwards if you have follow-up questions. As an overview today, we are going to cover 5 main topics. We're going to see a little bit who are our participants, what are the reporting requirements for them, what are the COP levels that applies only for business participants. We'll talk more about that. We're going to see who are our reporters. And I'm going to close the presentation with some recommendations. If we have some time left, there is an annex to show you how a submission looks like, how a COP, a report submission looks like. So let's talk about our participants. The Global Compact has 2 main types of participants. The business participants is any company, organization that does business for profit. And then we have the non-business participants. As of this data that you are going to see in this report was downloaded on May 7th. So as you might know, our database collects data in a real-time basis, meaning that if you downloaded this same data today, the numbers might look slightly different because let's say right now a company submitted their COP, so that immediately changes the data. This data is something that all local networks have access to, so you guys have also access to this data. Of course, you will see the raw data, the numbers in a spreadsheet. What I've done here is just put it in colors and graphics so it's easier to understand, but you guys have access to this data too. So as of 7 May of this year, 65% of our participant base were businesses and 35% were non-businesses. We constantly try to increase the business side of our participant base because the mandate that we received from the General Assembly from the very beginning was to engage companies into sustainability topics. That's why we continue to put a lot of effort into the business side of it. Non-business segment, of course, is very important because they are the ones who actually vet the participation of companies. They are the ones who raise issues. If they see that a company is not doing what they say they are doing, they are the ones to bring those issues up. So this segment, the non-business segment, is very important, but our main focus is business. We see that this distribution of the participant base is going to change. I'm going to explain that to you in a moment, why we think this distribution is going to change. Of course, here one last thing to mention is we keep trying to make our participant base one where the segment for business is larger than non-business. This is the participant base distribution per region. So as you can see, Europe is the region with many more participants. Then we have the Americas, including US and South America and Canada, of course, and then Asia, Oceania, Africa, and MENA. These two are the regions where we are currently placing more attention and trying to increase our participant base there. If you see, Africa presents a very interesting situation, and is the only region where this happens, that their number of non-businesses is larger than the number of businesses they have as Global Compact participants. So this is something that we are trying to address also in this region. The idea is that we have more businesses than not businesses. This is how it looks like for Turkey. Currently, Turkey has around 300 participants. I downloaded the data yesterday. As you know, these numbers are from May 7. Yesterday, I downloaded the data again, and you guys are closer to 300 participants now. So your distribution is 49% non-businesses, 51% businesses. So knowing this data and understanding these numbers, I think is very important for any local network to be able to develop your strategies and to allocate your resources. I wanted to compare this with the global distribution. As we said, is 35% non-businesses. In Europe, for example, the distribution is 28% for non-businesses. So that's how the participant base looks like. Now, in this slide, we're zooming into our business category. Now, forget about the non-businesses for a moment here. And this is how it looks like. The lighter blue indicates SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and the darker means larger companies. So in Turkey, you have 55% SMEs, 45 companies. In Europe, for example, the distribution is 60% of our participants in Europe are SMEs, 40% are companies. Globally, it looks somewhere in between. For globally, we have 57% SMEs. So it's somewhere in between the situation in Turkey and the situation in Europe. We consider that this distribution makes sense in the whole world. If we were to analyze how businesses are distributed in the world, you would find that there are a lot more SMEs than companies in the world. So that's one explanation that we have for having such a large percentage of SMEs. Knowing these numbers is also important because usually the needs of SMEs participating in the Global Compact are different than the needs of a company. A company typically has a sustainability department with a couple people dedicated to sustainability issues, maybe a sustainability director, and they have more resources. So working with a company of that sort is completely different than working with an SME who probably they have 20 employees, they all do everything, they are overwhelmed, and they don't have resources. So the strategy for both types of companies is completely different. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and this is the first break. If you guys have any question regarding the numbers, would like more information, please speak up. Any questions?
Hi, Anna. No, thank you. Since we're behind schedule and we already have this information as a local network, we can proceed to the other parts. Thank you.
Continue. Perfect. So now we're going to talk about the reporting requirement for our participants. Now you have a clear idea of who these participants are, where they are located. So now we're going to explain why, what are we requiring from them. So as you know, when they, before moving forward, when they join the Global Compact, they are committing to a number of things. Most importantly, they are committing to implementing the 10 principles into the strategies and operations, but also they are committing to reporting on the progress they have made in that implementation. The reporting component is crucial because if they fail to do it, they can eventually end up being expelled from the initiative. So we have a reporting requirement for all participants in the Global Compact. Business participants must submit a communication on progress. We call it a COP. Non-business participants must submit a communication on engagement. There are similarities on these two, and there are differences on COP and COE. We're going to understand both. The general aspects that are applicable to both COPs and COE are the following. So in these aspects, they are exactly the same. The target audience for a report, either from a company or from a non-business participant, is the organization stakeholders. There's a whole topic about how to determine who are the stakeholders of the organization. We typically refer companies to the GRI guidelines. We're going to talk about the GRI guidelines in a minute too, but those guidelines have done a very good job in guiding companies on how to determine who their stakeholders are through processes of stakeholder engagement, etc. So that's one way, one thing companies can use, but they must do their report thinking on communicating to their main stakeholder groups. The format of the report is flexible. Any way they want to do it, if they want to write it, to put pictures, to put colors, that is up to the company. If they want to divide it in chapters or divide it by principle of the Global Compact, is valid. One recommendation we do make is that if they already have a report through which they communicate to their stakeholders, they should include the COP information in that report. We do not want our participants to have to do additional work and to have a double burden to doing their Global Compact reporting. That's why they should take advantage of what they already have. The language has to be the language of the stakeholders, of the main stakeholders. The submission has to be through the website. Sometimes companies or even NGOs, they send us by mail their report. So we have here a library with all these beautiful reports with pictures, etc. But unless they submit it online on our website, that submission is not valid. It has to be through our website. There must be a PDF attached or using the basic template. We're going to talk about that later. And they must meet their deadlines. It's regular intervals for both communication and progress and COE. If they do not meet those intervals, they will be labeled as non-communicating. And if they continue to not report, they end up being expelled. So this is the skeleton. What you see on the screen here is the skeleton of our COP and COE policies. So for companies, we have our COP policy. For non-business participants, we have our COE policy. The COP policy has been in place for years now. It was introduced early on in the early 2000s with the idea of getting companies to holding companies accountable for their efforts and for their commitments. The COE policy is very recent. It's a very new policy. We just introduced it in October last year. The COP has three main requirements, so companies need to. First, in their report, they need to include a statement of continued support by their CEO. They must include a description of actions in all issue areas. If they are not covering one or more of the issue areas, they must explain why. It's what we call the report or explain principle. So it applies for our COPs. And thirdly, companies must include a measurement of outcomes in their COP. So these are the minimum requirements as established by our COP policy, and companies report against these requirements. When we were developing the COE policy, the one that is applicable for non-businesses, we wanted to follow the same structure of the COP policy to make it similar to mirror. The COE is a mirror of the COP. So non-business participants that are reporting according to our COE policy are required to statement of continued support by their chief executive. They have to include that in their report. They have to include a description of actions in at least one of the activities. So here's a difference we're going to talk about in a minute. And lastly, they need to include a measurement of outcomes. So if you notice here, the main difference between the two policies is that in the COE, they are not required to report against the four main issue areas. And it is important that you as a local network understand why. When the COE policy was starting to be developed, some people thought that non-businesses would report exactly as businesses do. Explain how they are incorporating these four main issue areas into their strategies and operations. Another group of people thought that the role of businesses within the Global Compact is not only to incorporate the principles. We assume they are already, for example, respecting human rights into their operations, but their role as participants in their Global Compact is to support our mission. And that is what they should be reporting against. So during the development of this policy, the COE policy, we opened the topic to consultation with local networks, with stakeholders, with external stakeholders, with internal stakeholders as well, like our board of directors, our management team. And after all this process of consultations, which took like 2 years to get all this feedback in and editing the policy, etc., it was decided that non-business organizations must report on their support to the Global Compact. That is very important, and I hope is clear. Now, each type of organization, of non-business organization, is different, and each type can engage with the Global Compact in a different way. So the Global Compact has drafted a list of suggested activities on which each one of these non-business organizations can support the Global Compact. We have, you will receive this presentation later, by the way, and you will be able to click on these links and it will take you directly to where the information is in our website. So we have a complete list of suggested activities. Let's see if my computer, okay, perfect. So this is how it looks like in our website. This is a snapshot because the list is longer here, but I just wanted to highlight to you these. If you are an academic, for example, these are the activities you need to report against. If you're a business association, these are the activities. Basically, a business organization in their COP, they would include first the statement of continued support by their chief executive. Second, they will indicate which of these activities they have engaged on. And thirdly, they will include a measurement of outcomes. The measurement of outcomes is worth noting applying to both companies and non-business participants. We encourage the disclosure of outcomes in qualitative terms, but also quantitative ways. Some companies and some organizations have more difficulty measuring the outcomes, but we do encourage whenever is possible that they include both numbers and narrative to show their outcomes. In some cases, some organizations have told us, guys, I have my COP ready for this year, but I just introduced my sustainability policies. I do not have any outcomes to report for this year. So in that case, what we encourage is that the organization reports on expected outcomes. So if they just introduced this policy, we ask them to include, okay, as a result of this policy, we hope to see a reduction in our energy consumption of 2% or whatever they believe it is. So it can be past outcomes or expected outcomes in the short term. Now, before going into this case, I want to ask you guys, is there any question up to here?
No.
Okay, perfect. Let's continue.
Sorry, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
A very fast one, actually. So I was looking at the list, and specifically came to my mind on the list for academic signatories. For instance, becoming a signatory to UN Prime initiative and reporting and sharing in progress in that manner, does that count as a COE for universities, for instance, or do they have to report in addition to their sharing information on progress reports also a COE? I think we're going to get a question as such from our signatories.
Yeah, okay. Everybody has received that question. I'm very glad you brought it up, and that actually takes us to our next slide. Because academics are an exception in this whole group of non-business organizations because they have their prime component. So as you might know, for Prime, they have their own report. The report, I think, is called the SIP, something like that. So they have that report, and that report counts for this submission. However, that report requires academics to report exactly as a COP. So that report tells them, guys, you university, tell me how you have incorporated the 10 principles into your strategies and operations, right? So that's what that report does. That means that in that report, they are lacking the one component that we think is so important, and is explain to us how your organization has engaged with the Global Compact. So what happened when we were developing this COE policy was that the academic group said, hold on one second. For my group, I do want them to be required to report on their implementation of the 10 principles and also on their engagement with the Global Compact. So they are an exception, and here in this slide you can see the two requirements they have. They have to report on incorporating the 10 principles and on promoting the Global Compact. So that's how and all these came from all the consultations, and the academics themselves were the ones who asked to have this additional requirement in their reporting. So to answer your question very succinctly, their prime report counts, yes it does, as long as it also includes some mention of how they have supported the Global Compact in its mission. Is that clear? Did I answer your question?
Yes, that is very clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. One thing I forgot to mention back here is these organizations would fulfill this requirement by meeting only one of these. If they meet all of the required one, all of the suggested ones, they meet 6, great. But the requirement calls for only one of them. If they only do one, it's fine, it counts for us. This is a timeline of how they are supposed to report that, as I said before, the deadlines in our reporting component are super important because if they miss it, there are very stern consequences for them. Sometimes I have companies calling me and saying, please, but I only missed it by a day. I only missed my deadline by a day, so please don't take action against my company. And the thing is that it's not me in my computer marking the company as non-communicating or expelling them. It's an automated system that the minute the deadline is up, the system automatically expels the company or marks them as non-communicating. So that is why it is so important. Here's an example for the COE. I should mention one of the main differences between COP for companies and COE for non-businesses is that companies are required to report every year. It's a yearly requirement. Non-businesses, on the other hand, they are required to report every 2 years. And that's a main difference between the two policies. So here's an example for a COE. Let's suppose we're an NGO in Turkey and we joined the Global Compact November the 31st. We will be required to report 2 years after that. November 21st in this example is 2015 would be the deadline. When this first deadline arrives, there are 2 possibilities. One, that this organization reports on time, or 2, that it does not report on time. If they do report on time, everything's fine. Their report will be highlighted in our website, and their next COP or COE, due date will be 2 years after that submission. So if they submitted in November 21st, the next deadline is November 21st, 2017, 2 years after that. If they do not report and the date of November 21st arrives, our computer, not Ana Blanco, the angry person, no, it's the computer who immediately turns that organization as non-communicating. And this is public information. Anybody who wants to see what's the status of an organization can go into our website and see that. So that's why it's important that organizations keep track of that. They are non-communicating for 1 year only. And after that year is up, again, there are 2 possibilities. One, that this organization reports on time. So in that case, if they report, the next deadline will be for 2 years after that submission. And the other possibility is that they do not report on time. So if they are not communicating and they do not report by that deadline, they will be expelled. The expelled participants are highlighted in our newsletter every 6 months, and they are listed also in the website, in our website. So being expelled is not a good thing. Now, this example was for a COE, for an NGO, for example. If this example were for a company, we were a company trying to submit a COP, all these deadlines would be yearly. So 1 year after joining, then 1 year after submitting is when the deadlines are set. Now we have the situation with the COE policy for non-business participants that the policy was introduced in October 31st of 2013, right? So any company joining after that date will be subject to these deadlines. Sorry, any non-business participants joining after that day will be subject to these deadlines. But participants, non-business participants, already within the Global Compact as of October 31st are subject to the deadlines starting in October 31st. So if you guys had your NGO who has been a participant since 2005, they are required to report by October 31st of 2015. That's 2 years after the policy was implemented. Any questions on deadlines?
No, we're all clear. We can go on.
Perfect. Okay, so as I've been making emphasis and repeating over and over again, our deadlines are strict. If they don't meet these deadlines, there are consequences. We can be flexible, and we have introduced mechanisms for our participants to be able to modify these deadlines. We understand that many things come up, there are a million things that can happen, and they might not be able to submit their report on time. So we offer some tools and resources. The first one, we call it a grace period, and the grace period is a deadline extension. We introduced this tool thinking on unforeseen events, things that you know, you were not expecting and they happen all the time. The grace period gives an additional 90-day period for that organization to report. The way of doing it is submitting a grace letter through our website. We will see that also in a minute. And the letter should explain the reasons why they are not reporting on time and why they are requesting an extension. This letter is displayed publicly, so stakeholders will have access to this letter and this information. Companies can submit as many grace letters as they want. However, they cannot submit 2 grace letters in a row. Saying this in different words is companies can have additional 90 days to report, but they cannot have more than 90 days at a time. So if a company submitted a grace letter, let's suppose their deadline was today, 23rd of May, they will not be able to meet this deadline. They submit a grace letter today. We extend their deadline for 3 months. That would take us until August, I believe. August 23rd, that's 90 days. On August 23rd, they must submit a COP if it's a company, or a COE if it's a non-business organization. They cannot submit another grace letter to get another 90 days. They can only submit a COP. But if they submit a COP by August, the next year, if they again need additional time, they can submit another grace letter. Another very common topic here with the grace letters, I'm guessing you guys have had this case, is a company had their deadline, let's suppose, yesterday, May 22nd. The deadline came up, and today they wake up and they realize they are marked as non-communicating in our system, right? So what they do is they write a grace letter today once the deadline has been up already and they are already non-communicating. They write their grace letter and they submit their grace letter, thinking that that grace letter would delete the non-communicating. And that is wrong, because once they have been labeled as non-communicating, the only way of deleting that label of non-communicating is by submitting a COP. A grace letter does not delete the non-communicating label. The only thing the grace letter does is give 90 days at the end of the period. Okay, and the second tool we have is an adjustment request. Is meant for companies who, or for participants, business or non-business, who already have a communication cycle, a reporting cycle internally, and they want to align their Global Compact reporting with their internal reporting cycle. So I joined the Global Compact. Let's say I'm a company. I joined the Global Compact in February. And so my COP is due in February, but as it turns out, my reporting cycle of my company is in June. And what I want to do is to be able to report in June. So what I would do in that case is submit an adjustment request and ask for the deadlines to be adjusted. Any questions on these tools for modifying deadlines?
No, I have only one question regarding adjustment request. And that is about, if it says that it's one time only, is it for the duration of the signatory's whole entire Global Compact Association, or is it for one reporting cycle only?
It's one time only ever.
Ever, and it's very strict, I guess. I haven't had any requests about shifting it twice, but just in case that I get it, I would like to clarify this.
Yeah, perfect. And we can work together on that, because this is very tricky. In the example that I just gave, when I was giving it, I realized this is one of the tricky cases. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this because I think it might be helpful. If the company's deadline is in February, right, but their reporting cycle is in June, let me see, their deadline is February, but it's in June. They will need to submit an adjustment request. Because the deadline comes in February, they won't have their report ready until June, right? But in many cases, this is the case, that the deadline is February, the COP deadline is February, but their report comes out in December, before the deadline. So companies are very engaged, very diligent, and they want to do things very diligently, and they submit an adjustment request saying, I want to report in December, the previous December, from the February deadline. In that case, there is no need for an adjustment request, because the moment they submit the report in December, whenever the report comes out, their deadline will immediately be set for December. So yeah, that is tricky. And if you ever receive a case like that, feel free to contact us, Alexandra or myself. We can help you analyze the case and see what's the best strategy there. Okay, do you guys have any other question regarding these tools for adjusting? Okay, so let's move on. Now we're going.
I just want to make one point. Anna, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Also, just one note. When a participant submits a COP, their next COP deadline would be 1 year after that. And let's say that they submit it a week before their deadline, then their next COP deadline would be a year after that. So even if they set the deadline to the date that they wanted, if they submit and if they publish their COP on a specific date, the following deadline will be 1 year after that one. I think that's also important to note.
Yeah, that's key.
Yeah, that is a good point, because then technically they could reset it from like 11.5 months from now, and then they'd get an additional year from that new set date. I think that you guys have another meeting too, and thank you so much. This has been really comprehensive. Just in terms of being able to time ourselves, since we have about 10 minutes left, can you tell me how many slides are left or which sections? Because this is actually really good for Sevgi and Didin, who have you know, very limited knowledge on reporting from a participant management perspective. But we have two colleagues here who I think would benefit more on, you know, the reporting requirements are different levels, and most importantly, like how this kind of fits in with GRI, CDP, integrated reporting, and all those stuff. But anyways, I just wanted to know, let you know so that you know we're 6 people here, so 2 of them are beginner level, 2 of them are advanced, and 2 of them want to know more from like a broader international framework perspective. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the COP levels. I guess this is going to be helpful, more helpful for the advanced people. So as we highlighted, the 3 main requirements of our policy are the ones. Now we're talking about these COP levels only apply to companies. For non-businesses, we just leave them with the report. We'll start the process. We'll see how that goes. Now, for companies, the whole framework is much more developed and complex. We have our differentiation program, which is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. We have the GC active level, is where reports that have met the 3 basic requirements will fall in. We have the learner platform here in the lower part of the graphic, is for reports that fail to meet one or more of these requirements. And we have our advanced category, that here's where I want to elaborate a little bit. In this advanced category, companies must meet, of course, the minimum requirements, but in addition to that, meet our advanced criteria. We're going to talk about the criteria in a minute. We have at the very top of the graphic the lead category. Is a leadership program. It's an invitation-only group of companies that strive to continue to improve and to be leaders in sustainability implementation and reporting. Again, that group is by invitation only. Right now it's about 50, 60 companies participating in that. The advanced criteria are 21 criteria at the moment. We revised them a couple of years ago. These are not the original criteria that we had, but these are the ones that we have, 21 criteria. And they fall under 4 main areas that it's easier to understand if you understand the areas. The first one is the topic of third-party verification. These we'll talk about these in a couple minutes. Let me mention all the areas. The next set of criteria are on implementing the 10 principles into strategies and operations. These criteria basically call for robust management policies and procedures in each one of the 4 issue areas. Then we have the category of take action in support of broader UN goals and issues. And lastly, we have corporate sustainability governance and leadership. Here, when you receive this, you can click here and you will have a complete list of the criteria. Each one of the criterion has associated best practices. I'm going to talk about that also in a minute. GRI, as you were mentioning, Denise, is a great tool for COP reporters, because doing a GRI report, either using 3.1 or using the G4, they can use those guidelines to fulfill our advanced criteria. We have drafted a document with GRI. This document was done together by the 2 organizations, and it guides companies step by step how the GRI guidelines can help them fulfill the COP requirements. As you can see from the topics covered by our our areas in our criterion, they are very much aligned with the guidelines. We have the governance piece. We have here in action in broader UN goals and issues. This touches upon the aspects. If you're familiar with GRI guidelines, these goals and issues of the United Nations are pretty much aligned with their what they call aspects. And the 10 principles into strategies and operations. If you know, again, the guidelines, you can see they have categories and they have their social, economic, and environment categories. Those categories are totally aligned with our principles and our main issue areas. So that is a way of aligning. Here I wanted to mention, unfortunately, yesterday when I was reviewing this presentation, I deleted the slide where I outline our cooperation with other initiatives, but we have very close ties with CDP, for example. Our environment group has based all of their reporting requirements on the CDP's framework. We work very closely also with the IIRC on integrated reporting. They recently launched their framework, and we have been also working closely to make sure that what we are requiring from our reporters is also in line with what other organizations are requiring, in a way that a company can meet the requirements of the different initiatives without having to do additional work or to double burden their jobs. Now, for our advanced criteria, as I mentioned, each criterion has associated best practices. The way of meeting one criteria is to meet at least one of the best practices. If they meet all of them, great, but with only meeting one, we consider the criterion was fulfilled. If a company wants to achieve the advanced level, the GC advanced level through their COP, they must fulfill all 21 criteria, all of them. If they meet 20, is not enough. They will be placed in the active category. They want to be advanced, they have to meet the 21. Now, the third-party verification, this was one of the main changes that we did when we revised our framework a couple years ago. We did not have a component, a requirement for third-party verification. However, we kept hearing from stakeholders, even from companies themselves, saying, look, the sustainability reporting, since it's largely a voluntary initiative, is not regulated and it doesn't have any external oversight by governments or any other authority. In many cases, sustainability reporting becomes, it can become greenwashing, or it can become a public relations exercise from the part of the company or the organization doing the report. So what we thought would add some credibility to these reports, specifically to the advanced level, is to introduce a requirement of third-party verification. We know that hiring one of the big fours to do a full assessment is very costly, and we do want all of our participants to be able to reach the advanced level. As I was mentioning before, SMEs might have issues with resources, etc. So, in order to be inclusive and to allow a large number of our participants to be able to reach the advanced category, we came up with all these options in which an organization can fulfill this requirement. We even allow for organizations to describe plans to undertake this type of third-party verification. Of course, the plans have to be concrete. It can't be saying in the report, oh yeah, we will do it eventually. No, it has to be a concrete plan that include goals, timelines, metrics, staff that is going to be responsible for implementation of this third-party verification. In our options, the options that we highlight here, we of course mention information reviewed by accounting firms, consulting firms, etc. But we include other creative ways such as stakeholder verification, panel of peers, and we even allow for companies to give us other ideas in which they will conduct credible third-party verification. Our requirement calls for a credible third party to be the one doing the verification. It can also be done just by anybody. And that's how it was introduced. This requirement started to be in effect January of this year, so it's a pretty new requirement. We developed a publication. If you click here, you will have access to the publication right away. It's explaining what is external assessment, how does it apply to each specific company, and who is in a good position to provide that service. Who is, in other words, a credible third party to conduct that type of verification. Let me go quickly over this. It's just a few slides. I just wanted to show the situation for you guys in Turkey now that we have a more robust understanding of our reporting system. This is the universe of your reporters, about 100. We learned already you have 300 participants. That includes non-businesses. Then of the businesses, there are some that are not required to report at this point because they are new, they are within their first year, so they are not required. These are the ones, these 110 are the ones that as of May 7th were required to report. You have 20% of those companies marked as non-communicating. They failed to submit their reporting on time. And 76% are communicating. Of the ones that are communicating, you have 86% in the active category reporting against the minimum requirements. You have 5% of those reporting at the advanced level and 10% as learner. Here, yeah, okay, I think I'm going to stop there to give a couple minutes for you guys to give me questions. Oh, this one I have to show you. These are the companies that have been delisted from your country. It has been 133 from the moment we started delisting companies back in 2004. 94% of those, that means almost all of them, have been expelled because of failure to communicate progress. And after that, I just have a summary, just highlighting the main points of each one of the policies. Key resources, if you click here, you will be able to go directly to the publications or to the website. And then I suggest that you guys familiarize yourself with all these reporting requirements. You support your participants in the submission process, and you please emphasize the importance of reporting within the deadline. That way we avoid the non-communication problem and the expulsion. These are key contacts, and that's it. I want to pass it on to you for questions.
Thank you so much for the really comprehensive presentation. I'm going to maybe pass the microphone around so that anyone can ask specific questions that they have. But as you know, we mentioned we're doing something with our reporting task force. We have a member, one member with us here now. We'll be contacting SMEs through consultations, and we've also talked about maybe doing some sort of guide or toolkit. I was wondering, do you know which local networks, it could be Europe, it could be outside of Europe, that have existing SME guides or toolkits that they've developed that are in English?
That are in English. That's the issue, because our champion local networks on that topic with SMEs are Spain, France, and Colombia. And all of them have resources tailored specifically for SMEs. Unfortunately, they are not in English.
What about Italy? Don't the Italians have one? They were doing something like this. We talked about it last year in Siena. I don't know.
I haven't seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah. Maybe we can talk offline about this, Denise, because maybe we can think on the possibility of joining efforts and find a way of translating those resources. If we know what's the volume of the translation, maybe we can find a solution there.
I just asked a question about the SME tool guide, so we're going to continue the conversation off course, but I want to just pass the microphone around so that everyone can ask questions briefly before they get on their next call. Any questions that you have. I think you had a question about the language, right?
Yeah, actually it was more than a question. It was just we were wondering, whether we can have it in English or not. But as you said, you're going to translate it. Then we are looking forward to have that.
We are not going to. I mean, we don't have the plans right now to translate it. But I'll be happy to talk further with your local network and others and see what makes sense.
Okay, and with regards to language, maybe we can also ask, I think it was on the slide, it was saying on the slide that people can submit their COP and COE reports on their own, with their own languages, stakeholder languages. Is it true?
Exactly.
Like,
so if it's
in Turkish?
Exactly. If it's a company based in Turkey that whose main stakeholders are in Turkey, speaking Turkish, we expect, not only recommend, we expect that report to be in Turkish. Otherwise, what's the point? They wouldn't be communicating effectively with their stakeholders. So we do encourage that. Now, there are companies that have main stakeholder groups that speak different languages. And some companies who have resources, etc., they go all the way and have a translated version of their report for those cases.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'll pass it to my friend.
Also, I just wanted to highlight an important resource. Can everybody hear me? We do have a basic COP template, which is available in various languages, one being in Turkish. And I believe I have shared it with your team earlier. And essentially what it is it really is a full-fledged template of a basic COP, and it indicates best practices under each requirement. And again, we have this available in Turkish, so I think this could also be a great resource to refer to.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. I have a couple of questions. I think it's regarding participant management rather than COP, but one is about employers associations. Do they get listed as business associations or labor trade union associations? How should they sign up?
They are labor trade union.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question is, while going through our list in Turkey, I have noticed some current signatories who are listed wrongly on the list. For instance, I've detected a couple of businesses who listed themselves as business associations. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. You know why? I'll tell you why. Well, I can't say for sure, but we noticed that case a lot because non-businesses did not have a reporting requirement. So some companies said, oh, I'll just do this and don't have to report. Now that has changed. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So so how do we basically turn them in? What's the procedure to go forward with this?
So look, the best way to do that is to write to them an email copying Alexandra Terasi, explaining the situation. You guys, by some mistake, have been placed in this, but you are really a company. Therefore, we will change your classification. but we wanted to notify you first. So the way of doing it is first communicating that to the company and then copying our office here, and we will help you make the change once the company is on board and everything. We won't do any change until we have an agreement with the company. But the first step is to start getting in touch with the company and let them know.
Okay, so we'll first contact them, get their consent, and then contact you for further assistance. Okay.
Exactly.
I had a question on the communication and engagement policy for non-business organizations that are not going to want to continue this journey with us because of this new COE policy. Should we try and direct them and contact them in advance so that if they want to voluntarily leave the initiative, they may? Or is it going to be the same policy? If they don't create a COE, then are we going to start, publicly listing delisted non-business organizations?
You know what? That's something that is still under debate. We have a few years to do that because we have effectively until 2016 until the first non-business would be expelled. October 2016. So we are thinking, but so that's something for debate if they are going to be publicly listed. However, to the first part of your question, yes, the strategy is, as you saw, we have globally 35% of our participants. That's close to 4,000 organizations, and we never hear from them. So part of the plan here is to clean a little bit our participant base and know who's engaged, who wants to continue with us, and who wants to leave us, and that's fine. So if they want to leave us, we want to give them the option of doing so gracefully through a voluntary withdrawal. We have been doing efforts at the global level, conducting webinars and talking directly with these organizations in case they want to withdraw. However, we do need your help at the local level because we know there are organizations who maybe don't speak English or don't follow what we do globally. So if you guys can follow up and explain to them what's the process for withdrawing, which is basically sending a letter. Alexandra can send you guys the instructions on how to voluntarily withdraw. That would be very helpful, and we can start the cleanup process for our participant base.
I have two questions about SMEs. One is, do you have data for what % of global signatories were delisted in SMEs?
Yes, we do, and they are. I'm very sad to say that the numbers are very, very sad. The vast majority of the companies we have expelled ever are SMEs. At the moment, we are currently at a rate of 3 to 1, meaning for each one company we expel, we are expelling 3 SMEs. It's a very worrisome situation. We are trying to deal with it, but a big component of the SME management is through our local networks. So that's why I also wanted to show you guys those numbers at the beginning to let you know, look, almost half of your participants are SMEs. So it does make sense from a strategic point of view to address them directly, and what you are trying to do on having specific documents for them, etc., is key. So yeah, the numbers are like that.
But there is a special policy for SMEs, right? They can have a moratorium process duration, and they can extend their submission of the COP. Can you briefly mention that, maybe?
Very good point. I'm very glad you mentioned it. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have been worried about the SME situation for a while now. We have been seeing this trend picking up, and we have been worried. So we thought at the end of 2012, we thought, what about giving them more time, giving them a special treatment? They are a special population. Let's give them a special treatment. Let's give them one more year, what we call the moratorium that you are referring to. So let's give them one more year. And during that year, we do outreach to them from here, from New York, and also calling our local networks to do outreach to them. And during that year, we will manage to save them all and to keep them in the Global Compact as active participants. So we launched that moratorium as a pilot project at the end of 2012. We tried it all of 2013, and we are conducting a revision of that policy, of that pilot program right now. The reality is that the pilot did not work as we expected it to work. Unfortunately, that extra year does not achieve our goals. It doesn't matter how much we reach out to them, they are not reporting, and they are still being expelled at the same rate, just that they are being one extra year sitting there. So we are revising that. We haven't made a final decision, and we need to make the communication. So what I'm telling you is very draft, but we are planning to end that pilot because it did not work as we thought it would work. But this is not something you have to worry yet. We will have a communication strategy to involve you guys in that and to let you know what's the future of the moratorium. But you are right. As of today and for the next until the end of this year at least, they will continue to have an additional year before they are expelled. Anything else, guys? Your questions have been very right on the target. I'm very happy to about that.
We just have last two questions, and then we'll turn the webcam on to wave goodbye so you can see who you've been talking. Actually, just joking. It's not working? No? Okay, sorry, just joking.
Mine doesn't work either, unfortunately. But next time we should plan something where we can see each other.
Hopefully. We wanted to know if there's any existing trainings on reporting with the International Employers Organization and the UN Global Compact.
With the International on reporting, no. Specifically on reporting, we do not have that. But if you guys have an initiative that way, we'll be very happy to work with you. We do have programs for foundations specifically. We have a couple with NGOs, but we haven't had coverage on the labor front. So we'll be happy to work with you if there's an initiative on that front.
Okay, and then our last question is, are local networks allowed to use this webinar Go meeting system to conduct like their own local network training, you think, or no?
Oh yeah, that was one of the points in my presentation, just that at the end I was rushing. But one of the main, if you remember in the suggestions that I had in the last slide, was support your participants. One way in which you can support them is conducting webinars like this one, like we just did. Is fairly easy. We lend you the platform. Of course, we lend it to 101 local networks, so you have to register ahead of time to make sure that you have your time allocated. But you can use this same system that I'm using today with your companies. And this presentation for today was tailored specifically for your local network, but you can use the material and switch it, turn it into, make the changes that you need and present it to your companies. So absolutely, we encourage that.
And if you're not familiar with GoToWebinar, I'm happy to walk you through it as well. If you do choose to hold your own webinar for your participants, we can provide you with the login details, and I'm happy to sit with you on the phone prior to that and walk you through how to use it.
Yeah, I think none of us have used the GoToWebinar system before, so I think that would be very helpful. For the first time only, if you have something written down, a tutorial, just not to take your time too much, I think that would be great. But if you can if you have any time, I would really appreciate it when the time comes that we need to use it.
Yeah,
Currently
and
we don't, yeah, sorry, Anna.
go ahead, go ahead.
Currently we don't have step-by-step guidance on how to use the webinar written down. Maybe that's something we need to look into, but for the time being, I'm happy to pick up the phone and walk you through it, as I've done with another local network as well.
And I wanted to tell you guys that at the beginning, it seems a little bit scary. It happened to me when I first started conducting webinars. I was, my God, what is this system? And are they going to hear me? And then I have to talk in front of all these people, and it's a little bit scary. But once you do it once or twice, it's like it's a really easy tool to use.
Exactly.
So if you can break through that initial nervousness, then it works pretty well.
Okay then, so I'm looking at the room right now and I don't see any further questions. People actually, they're waving their hands and sending all their best wishes from Istanbul. And so if you have any further points to make, we're waiting, but if not, we would like to wish you a great weekend and all the best wishes from Istanbul.
Thank you very much. The same from here. I'm going to send you guys this presentation in PowerPoint format so you can adjust it later. And also, I would encourage you to look at it at the very end of the presentation. I had an annex on how to submit a COP. It's very easy. You just have to look through the pictures. So I encourage you to do that once you receive the presentation. And thank you so much. It was great, and please feel free to contact us with further questions.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.